Well, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So glad you're here. So yes, we are going to be replacing the high pressure oil pump today. And if you just want to skip ahead to see me wrenching on the thing, go down to the timestamp down below at the bottom and you can just fast forward. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But for those of you who want to know why I'm replacing the pump, I have a little bit of footage to show you. You might find it interesting. So a couple things here that led me to this to the decision to replace it was I wanted to test the computer to see if there's like an internal short or like a capacitor or however that computer works, if there's something wrong. So I took some MIG wire and back probed the IPR valve, and I wanted to test the voltage while under a load while driving down the road. So I hooked that up to my multimeter, and while driving up to about 35 to 40 mile an hour, I got up to about 7 volts, and like always, that check engine light kicks on around that time, and it dropped the voltage down to like 3.5. So I think the PCM is working properly. I think it's seen that there's a pressure loss somewhere, it can't keep up, and it's throwing a code. Also, I found some metal flake at the bottom of my oil pan, and it's almost like a glittery toothpaste consistency. So again, I have a photo to show you, but there wasn't a lot, and it's not really like, it's not super concerning. It was at the time, but the more I've talked to people, I don't think I need to really worry about it, but it is still kind of interesting, like where would that come from? I have a couple thoughts on it. It could be that there is a poppet valve inside one of the injectors, and there's like some metal on metal contact there, and it's wearing prematurely. So I took the valve covers off, and I wanted to see the oil return out of each injector. So in theory, the more oil that's returning out of the injectors, the more wear there is internally inside. And so all of them looked okay, except for injector number 3. And again, I have some footage, but it seemed like it's just spitting out more oil than the rest of them. I don't know if it's spitting out that much oil, if that's definitely a problem, and that's where my pressure loss is, but it's just something to kind of put aside for the moment. I definitely could come back to that and replace that injector and just see, but if to do the job right, you got to replace all 8 injectors, but that's another story for another day. The reason I'm replacing the high pressure oil pump today is I've talked to some people, and first off, these high pressure oil pumps, guys, they're built like tanks. They don't really go wrong. The previous owner actually told me that I need to replace the high pressure pump, but being my first diesel truck when I bought it back in 2021, I had no idea of what I know today. And it was his first diesel truck too. So I wasn't just gonna take the word on a stranger and replace the most expensive single part you can on these trucks just because he said so. He gave me paperwork saying the pump was replaced around 3,000 to 4,000 miles ago. And so it was kind of suspicious saying, yeah, you need to replace that again. He couldn't give me a reason why. So that's why it's taken me 2 years to get to this point. And there's other projects that have gotten in the way, and I've had fun with those projects, and now I'm forcing myself to finish this truck before I move on. So I got myself a Bosch high pressure oil pump, and from my understanding, this is a brand new pump, hasn't been remanufactured or torn into. This is brand new, and there's the label for you. But it's not the most expensive high pressure pump you can buy, but it's definitely not the cheapest. The reason I didn't think it was the pump at the time was I deadheaded this pump, and it gave me 3,600 PSI out of each bank. And what that is, just grab the pump again, you have to block off one port and put a gauge on this side and then vice versa. Each bank gave me 3,600 PSI. So at the time, that told me that the high pressure oil pump was good, but the more I talked to people, they said, yeah, you might have a cold engine with cold oil, that deadhead's fine, but once that oil thins out, gets warm, you start demanding more oil, the high pressure oil pump sometimes can't keep up with that delivery. There could be something internally worn out, that there's like a cylinder inside and there's pistons. There could be some internal failure inside that just doesn't work right. So it could also be where my metal flake is coming from. Don't know, but another thing, the stock old body style Powerstrokes have a 15-degree swash plate. And what a swash plate is think of like a metal shaft, and think of like a CD that you put in your car. Think of that as on a 15-degree axis. So with a 15-degree axis, you're only gonna be able to flow so much oil. This pump has a 17-degree swash plate, so you're just getting a sharper angle, and in theory, it flows more oil. I don't know the differences, like a number to give you between the two, but it does flow more oil and is supposed to be more reliable. So also the Super Duties have a 17-degree swash plate from the factory, just to give you a little bit of a reference. So that's where we're gonna start. We're gonna start with the pump, and Also, there's some fuel lines I'm going to replace while I'm in the valley of the motor. So just some minor things, but we're going to replace this pump and just see if this is the problem, because it's been one of those things I've been curious about for 2 years now, and I'm finally getting to it. So guys, let's get started and see if this thing works. All right, so we got to get the fuel bowl out of the way first before we can even get to the pump. I'm already having to use a breaker bar to get this first bolt off. So, man, that's a lot. I don't think they should be on that tight. Time for fuel lines. There we go. Okay, so there's a fuel line right here that I gotta remove. And then there's one at the bottom too. Okay, there we go. And that's it. Just had to remove this wiring harness here off the side. It comes right out. So that's the bottom hose that I had to shimmy off. You can see it's all cracked. All these hoses are blue, and so that means they're Ford Motorcraft original hoses. So they got to be replaced before I put this all back together, but that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. Scout says hi. So the only thing keeping it in place now is this hose that's going underneath this system. It's the wiring harness for the IPR valve, so we're going to remove that. And now the whole fuel bowl can be removed. That's pretty neat. Oh wait, I guess not. There we go. So what I like about this Bosch pump that I bought is you get the Super Duty upgraded swash plate, the 17-degree one, but you keep the old body style hose fittings. The Super Duties had quick disconnects, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the IPR valve now while I got it right here in front of me. And this isn't a Motorcraft IPR valve, it's just something the previous shop put on, but it is almost brand new. It has maybe 2,000 miles on it. Okay. And a bunch of oil is going to come out when I do this. Yup. But that's what an IPR valve looks like. So I just skipped ahead and got the IPR valve out and moved on to the front cover here. It's held on by two 8mm bolts, and then it has to be siliconed shut to keep oil from squirting out of it. So peeled all the RTV off and gently pried on this cover with a screwdriver. So after gently prying on it, that's it right there. I already loosened up this 18mm nut for the front pump here, and I got to be very careful. Even though there's a thick washer keeping this pump on, you don't want it to fall off into the gear case. Like that. Dang it. It's a good thing they make this washer so thick, otherwise that would have fallen into the case and I would have had to open up a whole new can of worms. Jeez Louise. Alright, so just two more bolts left. There's one kind of in back here. And these are only torqued to 18 foot-pounds, so they shouldn't be too hard to remove. There we go. Okay. Okay, there's one. There's the second. So if I did my job right, it should just come off. Might still be stuck to the front gear. Okay, get that off. That's in the way. Now it should come. All right. And it came with the gasket too. Let's take this on the bench and see what we got. Okay, so quite the array of parts. So here's the old pump here, and someone in the comments can really help me out if they know what this stands for. SMP L20. I'm guessing that stands for a standard motor product brand, so this is definitely not a Motorcraft, but again, correct me if I'm wrong. Also, while I'm here, I quickly wanted to mention that this IPR valve is not Motorcraft, and an easy way to tell is this solenoid pack here. A Motorcraft one will be like a gold plating, this is silver. So this is just a aftermarket one, of course. Yeah, there's some more SMP, so this is probably standard brand. But when I pulled this out of the pump here, and I wiped this oil off with a rag, I could see more of that metal shaving. So I'm wondering if the pump internally is damaged and it's just throwing those metal fragments to the IPR valve. I don't know. Again, just speculating here, but it is interesting. So I thought I'd replace this lift pump while I'm in the valley of the engine, just because there's always been a fuel leak as long as I've owned the truck. Back here, there are a couple O-rings that are common for leakage on these trucks. And also, right in this valley, there's always been a small puddle of diesel fuel. Not a lot to be alarmed about. It could have just been the hose that was leaking, but there is a weep hole underneath here that you can't see. And once it starts leaking out that weep hole, the pump's pretty much finished, just like a water pump. So it's worth replacing it anyway. I got the replacement gaskets, the hoses, the whole 9 yards. That way I'll never have to think about it for the rest of the time I'm owning this truck. So, okay, so Ford didn't give me a lot of room to get this banjo bolt off, but just kind of have to sneak it back here, kind of like that. And I guess I have to remove this intake piping. Okay, wasn't so bad. Still got the O-ring on there. All right, that wasn't hard at all. It came right off. And it's out. So basically, fuel comes in that hole and out the side. I gotta be honest, guys, the reason I haven't done anything about this since I've owned the truck is there's a tappet at the bottom, and it's not captive. So if you lose that tappet, it just goes out of the pump into the bottom of the motor, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, you got to take off the oil pan or disassemble the engine somehow to get it. So this is kind of sketchy what I'm doing, even more sketchy than taking that washer out of the front cover. Okay. All right, straight up. Straight up. Oh. And there it is. It's still attached. All right, let's get this thing away from that hole. You can see the hole right there, and that thing in the middle of the screen is the cam. So if that plunger were to fall down out of the pump, it's going to go around that cam, fall all the way down to the bottom of your engine, then you just open up another can of worms. So really glad that didn't just go wrong. That was best case scenario right there. All right, well, everything's disassembled. So Motorcraft lift pump is coming in the mail. I'll be installing that other Bosch pump in a second. That IPR valve I'm just going to reuse for the meantime. I should have gotten a Motorcraft one, but they're not cheap. I am going to be replacing the hoses though, and the gaskets that go on the back of that banjo bolt. So the reason this was so stressful to me were these lift pumps are pretty simple. They're just like what you'd find like a 7.3 IDI, you know, it just runs off the camshaft and it pumps fuel to your heads. But the reason it's so critical is this tappet. Look at that. It's pushing, oh man. Do you guys see that? It's pushing fuel out that weep hole. That wasn't scripted, I just figured that out, guys. That's the weep hole that tells you the pump is internally worn. So this is definitely a bad pump. And I was about to say that this plunger can fall out of the pump and fall down and dance its way to the bottom of the oil pan or worse. And so that's why it was so critical for me that it stayed with the pump. All right, so I still got to get this front bolt on, but I'll torque these down to 18 foot-pounds first. Okay. Okay, took a little break from the high pressure pump. Still got to torque that gear down, but I got the hoses from Riff Raff Diesel. They're cut to the perfect length and they're rated for this truck all the way up to 300 psi, which is important. I can just put them in the truck and I don't have to think about it for the rest of the truck's life. And then these are the two washers that have to go on the back of the banjo bolt of my new Motorcraft pump. One in the front here that'll line up against this surface, and then the back of the banjo bolt. So I'll put a little oil around this gasket, I'll put it in and put it all back together. And it's in. Okay, so I'm waiting on the torque spec for my local dealership on these two bolts here. I just cinched them down a little bit. I can torque them later. In the meantime, I'm going to put the banjo bolt in, but I got to get these gaskets in first. There's one that goes in front of this fitting and then on the back, so both those sides are sealed. It's a pretty common place for leakage, and I'm glad I'm replacing it now so I don't have to think about it in the future. It's going to be pretty tedious. Well, there's just absolutely no room to work on this thing, but getting just enough fingers to be able to turn this on by hand. And I got most of it with the gasket in the back and the front, checking several times that gasket in the front is still there. Well, there's no way I'll be able to get a torque wrench on this thing, so I'm just gonna have to do it the German way. Good and tight. So before I tighten down this bolt for the high pressure oil pump gear, someone has to be at the bottom of the crankshaft pulley holding that still so I can torque this down to 95 foot-pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it. I want to really make sure it's on. All right, so I think the high pressure oil pump is good to go. I need to still put the front cover plate on, but there's some oil down here and I thought that was from the gasket. But what I think is happening is when I didn't have that lower crankshaft bolt held in place, it leaked some oil. You can see some oil coming out of this top line here. So I think we're good. I think the gasket's doing its job. Everything's been torqued down to spec. And I got to get the IPR on before I do anything else. And then it's time to hook up some fuel lines and put in the fuel bowl. Oh. Already making a mess. All right, so it took quite a while to get these stiff hoses on, but I got them on, including the return one. Now I just got to put in the Y pipe for the turbo, tighten up some of these hoses, and I think I'm ready to start the truck. All right, things are going well in the engine bay. All the hoses are clamped down. It took forever. It was a huge hassle, but now I'm working on the front cover. And I cleaned it up a little bit. It was rusty on one side, so I got all the RTV off, and Just gonna apply it on the cleanest side here. Cleaned up the bolts while I was at it. All right, moment of truth here. So I got all the hoses clamped down. This is clamped. Got the intake piping, retorqued the injectors here to 10 foot-pounds, all 8 of them. Everything's on, hoses are tightened up, just gotta add some diesel fuel. And it looks like there's a broken O-ring for this filter at the bottom of this stem. So I'll have to replace that later, but I just filtered out some diesel with a coffee filter. That might be enough right there. A little bit more. Well, I can already tell a difference. It's idling a little bit quieter, and I think it's because it's getting better fuel to the injectors, having a stronger pump. And then also the 17-degree swash plate on the oil pump, it's giving more oil than stock. So let's take it on a drive. This is the first test drive here, and we'll see if we fixed it. All right, here we go. Well, there's 45 and there's no issue. Oh my gosh. I think I fixed it. Holy crap. I fixed it. No way. Okay. I don't want to get my hopes up too soon here. Let's take it on a real drive. Every time I've taken this truck on a test drive, it's always been on this roundabout. Let's get it up to speed a little bit. Oh my gosh. Guys, I think I fixed this truck. That is insane. I am so happy right now. You can't even believe. I don't even know if the footage is good because the sun's probably in your guys' eyes. Sorry, I haven't even been focusing on the camera. It's fixed. Oh my gosh. It is fixed, you guys. Oh man. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Oh, all right. Well, I'm gonna tell my family the good news, and I got some phone calls to make. There's a lot of people that helped me get to this spot right here. So let's wrap this up in the garage. Well, there you have it, guys. The truck's done. It turns out it was a high pressure oil pump all along. And I don't think that lift pump was helping anything with the fuel leaking out the weep hole. It was probably starving the injectors of fuel a little bit. And so it's just great to have the truck up and running properly. It's flowing more oil, it's flowing more fuel because it's running right. So it's just a great running daily driver truck now. I am gonna do an oil flush just to get all the potential metal flake that was from the old pump out of the engine and just start clean and fresh. Put a new fuel filter in there, just general maintenance stuff. But now I know where I stand on the truck, and I should have a real easy going maintenance schedule from here on out, because I already replaced the injector O-rings, all the sensors have been replaced. I think it'll give me trouble-free miles for the rest of the truck's life. So I'm really happy about it, guys. Let me know if you want to see that high pressure oil pump be disassembled. I'm kind of thinking, because I got to return it to the company to get my $200 back for a core. I'm thinking of just tearing it apart and seeing what was broken inside just for the heck of it. Let me know in the comments section down below if you'd like to see something like that, because that pump has caused a lot of trouble throughout the 2 years of me owning this truck, and I kind of like to see what went wrong. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Thanks to all my subscribers for sticking with me all these years of saying P1211, I'm gonna fix it this way, and I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I finally fixed it. I've said it before on the channel, it's just a good lesson to not quit and to keep going, and that's the result. I now have a great, beautiful daily driver truck that I can take anywhere, and it's just going to be a really good asset for the family now. So guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.